So, if we move past the idea of satisfaction and performance, then we moved into this idea of engagement, this idea of the future of management. And I want to pick up here specifically with the idea of engagement based on our last podcast around performance and satisfaction. And the question here is, well, what actually moves people to connect? So we talked about need theories and cognitive theories and strategic and situational theories, this idea of building block theories, but we didn't get to the phenomena of engagement, which is about one of the articles that we've posted online. I hope you've had a chance to read it. Let's dive into really talking about what is this idea of engagement. So what's happening? Well, I think we need to take a look at historically what's going on in the workforce, what's going on in the workplace that is shifting this thing away from satisfaction into engagement. It's clear, the research is pretty clear that mechanical work is shifting into knowledge work and changing really how we approach our work and how we manage those that we work with. So where something was at one time quite repetitive and laborious and mechanical, we're now asking people to do things like make discretionary decisions or give of their knowledge at their organization. It's not about taking orders now, but it is about making decisions at almost every level. This is clear in industries like automotive manufacturing, production, farming, even things like working in an office park or working in almost any kind of job requires this idea of knowledge work. Well, this is fundamentally shifting because most of the theories that we've used up until this point will have been built around this idea of mechanical work because they were developed at a time when you could actually see people doing things. You could actually count whether or not someone was making enough widgets. Well, the widget industry is coming to an end. Now, we still make widgets, but the way in which we make them is no longer mechanical. It is about knowledge, and it is about discretionary effort. Well, back in the olden days, for mechanical work, monetary incentives worked really great. In fact, if I didn't work hard enough, you could dock my pay. Or if I made enough widgets, then you would be able to give me more money based on how many widgets I made over and above my quota. Well, for knowledge work, where the future of our work is going, monetary incentive actually undermines performance. So there's a problem here because all of the theories in which we might base our understanding of satisfaction and motivation on were built around this idea of mechanical work, but we're entering into an age of knowledge. The old theories of motivation may not be adequate to meet our needs. Most organizations are still operating, unfortunately, under old assumptions and patterns. This is a huge problem. Pause for a minute and think about where you work. What's your motivation strategy? Is it based on performance and pay? Is it based on bonuses? Is the next rank about making more money? Now, I'm not suggesting that making more money doesn't increase someone's level of satisfaction. It doesn't. It's not that it doesn't work at all. It's that it's not a long-term or enduring strategy. It's also not why people stay at organizations. If you think back to the table that we showed in our podcast about satisfaction and performance, people don't stay at organizations because they don't get paid enough. Now, to be very clear, we must pay people enough money to take money off the table as an issue. But once you do that, what will you do? Again, most organizations still operate under old assumptions and patterns. Well, what if we moved beyond the idea of satisfaction? Well, the research would suggest that about 1/3 of workers worldwide report being excited about coming to work. That only about 30% of them are actually engaged. So 1/3 would be like 4 people in our class, right? Everyone else would be disengaged with their work. Well, I have to wonder, well, what are the others doing or feeling? What is the other 70% doing? And not look at that as a challenge, but really reframe that as some kind of an opportunity. Well, this idea of engagement is one measure of workplace attitude, and it shows potential to boost productivity. The research has suggested it shows amazing potential to boost productivity. Increased commitment, unleashed untapped energy. Yet, if you ask most people, they'll tell you that they know what engagement is, but they don't actually know how it happens. They're not sure what are the mechanisms behind what is going on. Disengagement or non-engagement is somewhat rampant, expensive, and pretty bad for organizations. It's bad on multiple levels. Disengagement is not only bad for the organization, but it's bad for the employee as well. Keep in mind, the ratio here is 70 to 30. 30% of folks are engaged, only 70% are disengaged or non-engaged. What in the world is going on here, right? How do we actually move beyond this? Well, here's some more staggering statistics. Almost all employees report being engaged when they start work. Less than 40% that they're still engaged after 6 months. Let's put that into context. Think about the night before you started the job that you're currently at today. What did you feel like? Perhaps you were nervous and anxious and excited. I mean, for crying out loud, they chose you out of all of those people, right? You may have ironed your uniform a little better. You may have pressed your shirt just maybe a few minutes longer. Nobody comes to work on their first day disengaged. Nobody comes to work and says, man, I hope I get fired by lunch, or man, I hope by the end of the week I'm getting called into my manager's offices. Employees start their first day of work almost every time engaged, yet less than 40% report they're still engaged after 6 months. If we move beyond that, less than 20% report high levels of engagement after 10 years of services. What's going on within 6 months? Why after 2 years do 80% of people report significant declines in their engagement levels? There is a massive problem here. Huge. Well, how do we move forward? Well, we might think that it's leadership, right? That leadership is the way forward, that if we just develop leaders and we create the right skill sets and competencies for our leaders, we can actually move the needle on this. Well, a few years back, a survey came out and they asked corporate leaders, particularly HR leaders, what was the most important thing for your company to focus on that particular year? 82% of those leaders rated employee engagement as their top priority, the very top thing that their company could focus on. They could have chosen anything: strategy, supply chain, management, finances, accounting, new product development, research and innovation. They could have done anything, but they said engaging their employees was the absolute top priority. Well, that company sent another survey out and they said, well, do you actually trust your managers to do that? 85% of the workforce suggested that they doubted that their leadership has the skills or know-how to involve them, to engage them. 85% of that workforce said they don't trust that their leadership has the skills to involve them in any kind of engagement effort. A huge, huge gap. We have a long bridge to walk here when it comes to engagement. 82% of leaders say that it's the most important, the most pressing, the most strategic problem that they could focus on, yet 85% of their current workforce doubts that their leadership can actually do anything about it. Wow, that's amazing. Well, it seems that we might have a broken system here, that we need to fix some things, and we need to fix perhaps our understanding and our assumptions about why people work. Perhaps it is not so bleak, but rather it's actually a huge opportunity. Think for a moment about that 70%. You probably know someone who's in the 70%. Someone who is disengaged with their work. When they come home, they're unfulfilled. They feel less than valued. They're not sure how they contribute to their place of work. Perhaps you know somebody like that. And you know then firsthand about how it affects their life. You know how being disengaged or being non-engaged with their work can be such a disappointing experience of what work might be like. So we might not look at that as a challenge, but really as an opportunity. And we might pose this picture. See, here's this big group of people here. Why would any one of these people follow anybody? How would you engage them? How could you take any one person and engage them? Looking at this picture as a whole, as a global indicator, It would be tough to move this entire crowd, but what if we just picked one person? What if we focused individually? How would you help engage them? How would you help motivate them? How would you increase their performance? What specifically might you do? I'd offer you up this quote. Who are the leaders that we need? They're the leaders motivated to achieve the common good, who have the qualities required to gain willing followers in a particular culture at a historical moment when leadership becomes essential to meet the challenges of that time and place. This particular quote is by McCovey in a book called The Leaders We Need. And he suggests that there are leaders in certain phases of society, and that all of the different types of leaders are needed. But I would ask us here, who are the leaders that we need? Who will be the ones who are motivated to achieve a common good? What are the qualities that will be required? What's going on in our culture and at this historical moment? What are the challenges that leader must meet? What is going on? There's no easy answer for this, but here's what I would actually offer up to you about what employee engagement actually is. Employee engagement is defined as the process of positively motivating employees cognitively, emotionally, and behaviorally toward fulfilling organizational outcomes. This definition comes from Shuck and Woolard in 2010 in an article that was written in Human Resource Development Review. Now, don't miss that. Employee engagement is defined as cognitive, emotive, and behavioral. And it taps the psychology of work, not the satisfaction of work. Engagement taps the unique psychology of what is going on at work, one unique person at a time, not as a global indicator. Employee engagement is an individual level variable, not a global indicator of how the organization is doing. Engagement is also not a pizza party. Engagement is also not a survey. It's not a newsletter. It's not an event on Fridays. It's not getting a button or a mission card. Employee engagement is how much I believe and give of myself to the organization. And it taps that psychology. And it's rooted really in the ideas of meaningfulness, safety, and availability. And they take on great importance in this particular context. The degree to which someone says this work is meaningful to me, I contribute here, I'm a participant in what's going on. I feel safe here. I feel safe not only physically, but I feel safe socially. I can raise my hands in meetings and give of my knowledge and my opinions. And that I have the available resources to do my job. I have the software, I have the hardware, I have the time, I have the people, I have the knowledge, I have the ability to give. When people answer those three questions, this is meaningful, this is safe, and I'm available, they tend to engage. We break this down into a model called the Think It, Feel It, Do It model of engagement, which is explained in the paper posted up on Blackboard. This idea of engagement really revolves around this cognitive appraisal process that leads to some kind of a behavioral outcome. The idea of meaningfulness, safety, and availability you see is couched up under the box Think It, this idea of emotional commitment or this proportional giving of personal resources. See, take for example raising our hand in a meeting. This is something we've talked about already. If we take the example of raising a hand in a meeting. How many of you have been in a meeting before, known the answer to a question that someone has asked and not raised your hand? Why would you do that? Why would you knowingly have an answer for something that someone has asked a question to but not raise your hand? Well, perhaps you didn't feel like you had the knowledge. The knowledge wasn't available to you, or perhaps it wasn't very safe for you to do that. You knew that raising your hand exposed you politically or exposed you socially. Maybe you knew better than to raise your hand. Or perhaps you've tried to raise your hand before and it just simply wasn't a meaningful activity for you. Someone rolled their eyes, or they shot you down, or they said, we've already done that before. Or they said, you get the sense that your contribution really wasn't valued. So the next time it comes up, you decide not to do it. But perhaps all these things are the opposite, that you actually feel like you're a valuable contributor, that you feel safe and you know the answer to the question. At that point, you've moved through the cognitive appraisal process into the emotional commitment place, and you actually raise your hand. You give of your resources. You commit emotionally to raising your hand, which is what we see in the outcome. We actually see someone raise their hand. So our model of engagement kind of walks through three distinct buckets, if you will: the think it, the feel it, and the do it. And if we were to drop this in a model of leadership, I would pull from Shuck and Hurd's article in 2012, where we kind of display this particular model. That follower needs and motivation perceptions really drive leadership behavior. Really. So there's this domain of follower needs and motivation perceptions, and then leadership style that affects what's going on here with engagement. I would encourage you to take a look at the article, Shuck and Hurd, to learn more about how this particular model plays itself out and how we move towards employee engagement from the perspective of leadership. Make no mistake about it. Satisfaction is not engagement. Commitment is not engagement. Involvement is not engagement. Engagement in and of itself is a positive psychological state of motivation, and it's different from satisfaction. And based on the new psychology of work and the new rules of work and how work is transforming right in front of us, engagement is the future of management.